Hello, this is Jungle Jim at your service. Welcome back to the Jungle Jim Bible Story Series. I am Jungle Jim, theologian. A theologian meaning a person who is an expert in all matters related to God, or B, a person who is an expert in all matters related to people named Theo. Of the two, I am closer to the former. I am not the latter. I don't, however, say I'm an expert in all matters related to God. That's definitely an exaggeration. I've just spent many years trying to study God's ways and incorporate them into my life. I don't want to say in front of God that I claimed that title of being an expert. So, yes, that is who I am. And in my pursuit of theology, I attended many a college and university, and especially Mount Everest University, the university at the side of the world's tallest mountain. And so I mention that because I recently got a question from one of my close relatives, my third cousin twice removed, who asked me, Jungle Jim, have you tried other sports at Mount Everest University besides swimming? So, for those of you who didn't see our previous video, I will explain that at Mount Everest University, we've struggled to have sports teams because there are no flat places on which to build the fields and courts that we need. And we build them anyway and try the sport. But we always fail to take into account the gravity of the situation, literally. For example, we did try football. No, not the American version of football. That game where if someone ever tries to actually touch the ball with their foot, everyone is apparently in such shock that they have to break for a commercial every time it happens. Man scores a touchdown, kick the extra point. Break for commercial! They come back and man does a kickoff. A break for commercial. We can't handle it. I guess that's what's going on. I don't understand it. Let me tell you. But no, I'm talking about what the world refers to as football, what you Americans call soccer. So we built a soccer field, had the goals and the lines, and had to use black paint. White lines on snow doesn't work very well, let me tell you. But we tried the game, and it seemed to go okay. Kicking the ball uphill, at least, it was manageable. Difficult to score, but it's difficult to score in soccer anyway. And so, uh, the only problem was kicking the ball downhill because it had the slight tendency to cause an avalanche. And so once we dug ourselves out of the snow, and if you ever were to find a white ball in a bunch of snow, that was a mistake as well. If we were unlucky enough to dig up the referee and help them back up, find the goals and put everything back in place, by then it was just no fun. Everybody was so exhausted we just wanted to go and drink hot chocolate. Of course, we wanted to drink hot chocolate all the time, but that's another thing. So we did try the indoor sport of basketball. And oh, let me tell you, we had the most athletic student. His name was Jack. We called him Jumpin' Jack. Oh, Jumpin' Jack, let me tell you, he was like the NBA players. At least going in the downhill direction, he could stand behind the free throw line, jump, and dunk the ball. The opponent's free throw line. But now going in the uphill direction, he was about the only one who could touch the bottom of the net. So we tried an exhibition game. It was the Mount Everest University Gaspers versus the India Indians. And it went about like what I expected. The ref started the game, got the basketball, threw up the basketball. No, not literally. That would be gross. He tossed it up. And so the people inside, they jumped in. The team going downhill got the ball, dunked it. And then the people going uphill, well, and let me explain. We didn't use any timing rules like, you have to get the ball across half court in 10 seconds. You've got to shoot in 30 seconds or less because that didn't work on our court. So, everything else was the same, but we didn't use those rules. And so by the time the team going uphill got the ball to their side of the court and were ready to shoot, It was halftime. And so basketball just didn't work very well at Mount Everest University. There are other things we tried, but I'd much rather talk about today's Bible stories. And so we're going to pick up from where we left off in our last video, the story of Noah and how God in desperation flooded the entire world to start all over because all of mankind had become the exact opposite of everything he wanted them to be. People of peace, joy, faith, goodness, love. But they had become violent, cruel, people whose only thoughts were evil all the time. And so God found Noah, the only righteous man left, saved him, his wife, his 3 children, and their 3 wives, and along with all the land animals. Now God gave instructions to Noah similar to what he gave to Adam and Eve. He said to Noah and his family that they were to be fruitful and multiply. Now that doesn't mean they were to eat a lot of fruit and do a lot of math, which, I guess God wouldn't have minded, but what he meant was that they were to have lots of children. And he wanted them to fill the earth. He didn't want them to all spread, stay in one location. He made this entire planet. And so he wanted them to go here and there, hither and thither and there and thither and stuff like that. I don't know. You get the point. And so sometime later, as mankind was repopulating the earth, they did what mankind traditionally does with God's instructions. They did the exact opposite. Instead of spreading out and filling the earth, they decided they'd all stay together in one location. This is Genesis, chapter 11, from which I'm about to read. Notice I've got my Jungle Jim reading glasses for just such an emergency. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. It makes sense. Noah, everybody was descended from Noah and his family, so whatever version of the language God gave to Adam and Eve, Noah was speaking that at the time, and so everyone spoke that. And so, as men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone, and tar instead of mortar. And tar instead of mortar. Sorry, English language, it can be confusing. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth," like God wanted us to do. That was not part of the verse. I'm just, saying that. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, "If as one people, speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." Now this is a very powerful statement from the Lord. His own tongue has said that mankind, whatever, with speaking as one language, whatever they decide to do, they're going to be able to do it. And you kind of see it nowadays with all our advances in science and technology. Pretty much anything we think of doing, we're able to do it. Of course, when God said that at the time, the implication was that's not a good thing. Probably because we tend to take our technological advances and use them more for evil than for good. So God decided, I better put a stop to this. And so he confused their languages. And so all of a sudden, all over the construction site, conversations like the following began to break out. "Hey, can you pass me that there hammer? I do not understand what you are saying. What has happened to your language? What's a dada hammer? Pardon me, do you understand what this man is saying?" "Senor, I do not understand a word you are saying. Your words make no sense to me. It sounds like you want to talk to Pat and Anna, Senor, do you understand what mi amigo is saying? Qu'est-ce que tu dis? Your words. They make no sense. What is that with your accent? What you talking about? The banana? I do not understand. Monsieur, do you understand what this man is saying?
Hmm? Understand your words? I do not. In the proper order, your words must be said.
Language of the dark side, this is.
Understand you what he says?
Now listen here, I've been trying to follow this whole dad-burn conversation, and ain't none of you making no lick of sense. Here I am speaking with perfect pronunciation and grammar, and you just sounds like a bunch of babble. In fact, we might as well call this whole place Babel. How are we going to build a building like this? Well, I quit. Hey, Bubba Rye, you understand anything anybody telling you over there? And so you see that they just couldn't continue building the building because they did not understand each other's language. And so, yes, they would find a few people who spoke the same language they did, and they'd go settle here, and another group would go settle there. And so it says, verse 8, so the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, like he wanted them to do in the first place. And they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Now you may have been wondering what are all these lines on either side of me. Well, I want to take this opportunity to share with you a little food for thought. You see, according to the Darwinian theory of evolution, which claims, we all descended from a common ancestor, which we did. It's just Darwin didn't think it was Noah or Adam and Eve. Well, it would seem that, I got to face this way. I've got video dyslexia. You'll have to pardon me. That all the languages of the earth would have a common ancestry, if this were true. You see, we have German, Italian, Spanish, English, and French, that all descend from Latin. Well, in the same way, you would think that all the languages of the earth would descend from one common language. But the problem is there are languages that have absolutely nothing in common with each other. And so what we see is, yes, we have like the Latin, English, French, Spanish, etc., all descending from Latin, but then in other parts of the world, there are similar languages descending from one common ancestry, and another language, a set of languages descend from here, and these languages descend from there. But none of these have anything to do with each other. Absolutely no common ancestry whatsoever. And so what we observe on the earth today is a model that suggests everything we're reading about the Tower of Babel is true, and not the model that Darwinian evolution would suggest that we have, or that we would have had if mankind had obeyed God and decided to spread out over the earth in the first place. So that's a little more food for thought, hopefully a little faith-building thought there. So faith-building and hat adjusting. So sometime later, now many years after Noah and his day in the flood, God found a man whom he loved dearly, because this man trusted God. And his name was Abram. Abram had a wife whose name was Sarai, or Sarai, as in Sarah, I can't pronounce your name. Sarai, as we spell it in English. So God saw Abram as a man of great trust and faith. And so this is what we read in Genesis chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abram, Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran, Haran being the place where he lived at the time. He took his wife Sarai. I thought I better read that just in case you thought, well, maybe he left her behind. But no, there's some wonderful things here, important things here to observe. One was God told Abram, I will make you a great nation. Now, what we didn't read at the time was that Abram had no children. He was 75, and thanks to another section of the Bible where we learn Sarai was 10 years younger than he, she was 65 at the time. That's a little old to be having a nation, to be having children, shall we say. And so that's a little point of, something to think about. Yet it didn't seem to bother Abram. He believed what the Lord said. Something else God said is that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, that is a prophecy of the coming of Jesus, Son of God. For you see, Jesus' mother Mary, his father was God, but his mother was Mary, was descended from Abram. And through Jesus, anyone of any nation can be forgiven of their sins. They can receive the promise of eternal life with God and escape the wrath of God that is coming upon the world. And so, through Jesus, all nations can and have been blessed. And that is what God was referring to when he told this to Abram. But Abram didn't know it at the time. So the last thing I want to point out is that God told Abram to move to the land I will show you. So he didn't exactly specify where Abram was going. But this didn't bother Abram. He trusted the Lord. The people at the U-Haul, however, where Abram went to rent the camels, they were very upset about this. What do you mean you're going to the land God will show you? You've got to tell us where you're going. When are you going to turn these camels back in? We're trying to run a business here. And so they weren't so happy. But sometime, before Abram set out, God told Abram where he was going, because in verse 5, it says he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot. We've got a lot that we could say about Lot, but I don't have lots of time, and so I'm going to refrain from saying a lot about Lot. Do you understand that? All the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Now, Canaan is the land that comprises basically the eastern border of the Mediterranean Sea, modern-day Israel, Syria, and all that. From the Mediterranean Sea all the way out to the Jordan River, that boundary, how far north and south, I don't exactly understand, but that's okay. The exact boundaries weren't important. It was that area of the world in which Abram, Sarai, and Lot, they all settled. And in verse 5, it says he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had. Well, I just read that. I didn't. Verse 7, we read that the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. But again, Abram, 75, Sarai, 65. And God's talking about having their children, and yet Abram trusted the Lord. Now, sometime later, we don't know exactly how long, probably years, very likely years, God again appears to Abram. This is chapter 15 of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. And it says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Now Abram responds to this, and I'm going to do a little paraphrasing using my Jungle Jim spiritual insight to try and share with you what the conversation was most likely like. I've said before, in the conversation of the Bible, I believe most of the time we don't have every word that was said, but we do have the most important parts. And so whenever I do this little filling in of the gaps, understand that's just Jungle Jim opinion and theory. Okay, so take it for what it's worth. About $1.95 negative. So anyway, Abram's response was basically, God, this is very nice of you. I appreciate this. That's wonderful. But there seems to have been a minor oversight. I still don't have children. I mean, a servant in my house is going to be my heir. So what can you give me? But God assured Abram, said, no, 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 no. Your son coming from your own body will be your heir. In fact, verse 5, it says, he took him outside and said, look at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Now, for those of you who've lived in big cities all your life, you may think, what? He's going to have 6 or 8 descendants? That doesn't make sense. No, no, no. I understand. In the old big city, you look up at the sky, you can't see many stars. But now, if you go out into the country, where there's not all these lights getting in your way, you look up, and it's breathtaking. Well, partly because it's so dark, you're scared to death of what's going to leap out, and that takes your breath. But no, you see all the stars in the sky, and it's breathtaking. And you can't count them all. And so Abram looked at the starry sky, and this is what happened. It says, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. You see, Abram believed God, and as far as God was concerned, that was righteousness. I told him he's going to have so many descendants are going to be like the stars in the sky, yet he's so old, his wife is so old, they're too old to have children, and yet he trusts me, he believes me. That is righteousness as far as God was concerned. Now, so Abram and Sarai know that they're supposed to have children, and they've waited. And they've waited. And so now about 10 years have passed. Abram's 85-ish. Sarai, 75-ish. And Sarai has finally had enough. She did what we often do as humans. We pray for something and we ask God for something, and we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And finally we decided either, maybe God's a little too busy to answer our prayer. And so we just better take matters into our own hands. I mean, what could go wrong with that? So Sarai goes to Abram and she says, okay, here, look, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give you Hagar, my maidservant, to be your wife. You will have children through her, and they will be mine. So in other words, Hagar was going to serve kind of like a surrogate mother, and she would have, through Hagar, Sarai would have children somewhat indirectly. And so Abram heard this plan, and he looked at his 75-year-old wife, looked at her much younger maidservant, looked back at his 75-year-old wife and said, basically, well, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. And so he took Hagar to be his wife. And so she became pregnant. And when she saw that she became pregnant, she despised her mistress Sarai, her female mistress, meaning female master. She despised her because, probably because, she felt like she was being used, which she was, which probably contributed to the feeling of being used. And so she despised Sarai. Well, Sarai she was upset about this. She marched up to Abram, and she said, "This is all your fault." To which Abram responded as any husband would. Uh, what? And so you see, meanwhile, as Abram was doing the thing, he was playing it out in his mind. He's going back over the details, and okay, my wife came to me, and she told me to do something, and I did it, and now she's mad at me for doing what she told me to do in the first place. How am I going to get out of this one? And so Sarai continued, "Yes, I gave you Hagar, my maidservant, to be your wife, and now that she's pregnant, she despises me." So Abram did also what any good husband would do. He wiggled his way out of it as fast as he possibly could, like a worm bathed in oil. He responded, "Okay, well, she's your servant. Do with her as you please. Do with her what you want. And leave me out of this." Of course, the last part was more, under his breath, to where Sarai could hear, of course. Like any wise husband knows, you can't say those things very audibly. So Sarai did exactly that. She took Hagar, and she was cruel to her. Gave her we don't know exactly what she did, but gave her probably extra tasks, or she'd do a task, and Sarai said, "No, you didn't do it right. Do it all over again." And who knows what she did. Made her listen to David Hicks comedy routines. I don't know, but she was very cruel to Hagar. And so finally Hagar couldn't take it anymore. She fled. She ran away from Sarai. And so now she's out in the desert. She's pregnant, and she's in great distress and trouble. But there, an angel of the Lord appears to her. You see, this is Genesis chapter 16. It says in verse 7, "The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert." It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. We're sure of that. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael." Of course, if she was going to have a daughter, she would have been named Ishfemale. But yes, Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man, and his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. He will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Not going to get along with people very well, but still. Hagar gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me." In Hebrew, El Hoi, I can't pronounce it. Elroi is meaning "you are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." I will close with that beautiful thought. Hagar does go back. She serves Sarai. She gives birth to Ishmael when Abram is 86 years old, thereabouts. But the beautiful thought there is we're out in the desert of our lives, in the wilderness, and we're in our trials, our temptations, our struggles. We're hurting, we're running, and yet God sees us. And if we will look for him, if we will listen for him, he will reach out to us and point us in the way we should go and lead us in the direction of godliness, righteousness, peace, faith, love, joy, even in the midst of our pain. So, have a wonderful rest of your Bible study or whatever you may be doing. This has been Jungle Jim at your service. I struggled to end these.